All right, so I hope you had some time to try example 2 on your own. It was very similar to what we did in the last question, okay? But let's go ahead and go through this. So what I'm going to do is write down my distance formula. So D is equal to, so the distance is equal to, all right, x2 minus x1, close up the parentheses, squared, plus y2 minus y1, close the parentheses, squared. I never make my square root long enough. Okay. Now, let's go up to that example 2, and then let's label our points. So I'm going to label this x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay. All right, so plugging in, I'm going to rewrite my long square root. And I've assigned -1 to be my x2. So I'm going to have -1 minus my x1 is also a -2. So I'm going to have -1 minus a -2, which turns into +2 squared. Plus, all right, my y2 is -4 minus my y1, which is 3, close up the parentheses, squared. Simplifying, we're going to get -1 plus 2, which is 1 squared, plus -4 minus 3 is -7 squared. Continuing on, 1 squared is 1, plus -7 squared is +49, which means that 1 plus 49 is 50, which is my final answer. Okay? All right, not bad. Now, this next question, though, all right, is a doozy, all right? It is a very good algebra question, all right, but it's also an excellent honors level geometry question, okay? So my suggestion is that you take this very slow. You write down all of your notes, okay? Don't skip steps, and you'll get a lot of practice with these because I really like them. Okay, so let's take a look and just kind of dissect what this question is asking us to do, because we now have variables, all right, in our coordinates. But what's really important is this part right here. And it looks kind of insignificant, but remember what the segment means without that hat on top, without that little line on top, remember, means the length of, or the distance of, right? So I now know that the distance of JK is equal to 5, okay? So let's go ahead and write out our long distance formula, okay? And again, it's going to be x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And that's going to be equal to the distance of JK, okay? So nice and slow, all I did there was I wrote the distance formula, and I'm setting it equal to the distance of what I'm trying to find, which is JK. Okay, now next step is I'm going to go again and label my coordinates, all right? So we're still doing the same exact stuff that we did in just a normal distance problem, okay? So I'm going to label this n, x1, and then n plus 2 is y1. The whole thing is y1, okay? 3n is x2, and then n minus 1, the whole thing is y2. Okay, so let's substitute in. Common mistakes, I'm going to point them out, all right? So just be very, very careful. Don't rush through. So I'm going to rewrite my long square root, and I'm even going to make it a little bit longer this time because I have more stuff to write in. Okay, so what did we label as x2? Well, we labeled it as 3n. So that's what I'm going to plug in for x2. So I have 3n minus, all right, and what's x1 is just n. Close it up. Squared, plus, all right, y2 is this whole thing of n minus 1, so that's what I'm going to plug in, n minus 1, all right, minus, and this is where students make mistakes, because when we write in that y1, which is n plus 2, we have to subtract the entire thing of y1, which means that we need to put that in parentheses. So n plus 2 needs to go in parentheses, close up both sets, and then squared, okay? So common mistake here, guys, is not putting in those parentheses around that y1. Now, we're going to set that equal to the length of JK, which we know is 5, right here, all right? The length of JK is 5. So that looks kind of intimidating, right? So we just now need to simplify, all right? Let's just really bank on our algebra skills and just simplify that mess, all right? So let's start within our parentheses. What is 3n minus n? Well, you're just combining like terms here, all right? So all it is just 2n. So I'm going to have 2n in parentheses squared plus, okay. Now, what I'm going to do before I fill in this set of this square root is I'm actually going to simplify first. So what do I do with this minus? I'm going to distribute it through. So what I'm going to get is n minus 1 minus n minus 2. And if I continue simplifying that, my n's are going to cancel out. So what am I going to get? I'm going to get negative 3. So this actually turns into negative 3 squared is equal to 5. Okay. So we should be able to follow that algebra, okay? That is my expectations. Maybe not that you would be able to do this completely on your own, but you should be able to follow that algebra in this honors geometry course, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this and bring it up here so that I can keep simplifying. So again, this is algebra, guys, okay? So exponent properties means I have to take that 2 and share it with the 2 and the n, right? So I'm going to get the square root of 4n squared plus negative 3 squared is 9 is equal to 5. So this is where I think like the stopping point should be. All right, you should be able to simplify, or you should be able to follow along. And this is where the real discussion comes in, because we can't take the 4n squared or the plus 9 to the other side because it's being protected by this square root right here, right? So what's the opposite operation from a square root? Well, it's squaring. Squaring a square root will get rid of it, right? So that's exactly what I'm going to do, is if I do it to one side, if I square that left-hand side, I also have to square the right-hand side, okay? So I'm squaring both sides, and that's going to get rid of the square root. So all I'm left with is what's underneath the square root, which is the 4n squared plus 9. This time now it's equal to 5 squared, which is 25. And now I can solve that. So I can subtract that 9 over from both sides because I got rid of that square root. And I'm going to get 4n squared is equal to 16. And then now I need to get rid of the 4, and because that's connected through multiplication, I'm going to divide the 4 on both sides. And I'm going to get n squared is equal to 4. And now we're kind of in that same position as how do I get rid of a square? What's the opposite operation from squaring something? All right, it's actually square rooting both sides. So I'm going to square root both sides, which means that n is equal to 2. Now, the perfect answer, and I wouldn't take off points if you forgot this, is actually plus or minus 2, and you'll learn that in Algebra 2, all right? But if you just had 2 as your final answer, that's fine, but what's even better is that plus or minus 2, okay? Wow, so that was a huge question, all right? And I understand that is probably a lot, all right? But we should be able to rewatch this, follow along. So if you didn't understand it, go back through the video or come see me during office hours, okay? But I'm going to pause here, and then we have midpoints to talk about.